Okay, so we got the brand new Yoimiya weapon tier list. This tier list involves math. I did math. I made a DPS calculator. You can have it linked to the calculator in Discord if you want to check it out. All the spreadsheets and everything that we put on there. So if you want to use the calculator, all the formulas are labeled, and you can make a copy for yourself and want to use it and try it out yourself if you want to do a bunch of different things. Only caveat is I'm basically taking this character at 100% crit chance when the math, and I'm actually balanced, and I balance stats in this video as well to make it so that it's a fair stat ratio between the two. All of them, I did testing for the weapons in this video for every single weapon that we possibly could, and we also did math to back it up as well. Jump into it. All right, so Yoimiya is out, and I recorded a weapon tier list last night, and then I made some adjustments. We'll be doing this weapon tier list to go over what the best weapons are for her, and the results are actually pretty surprising based upon how she does her calculations. The consensus out there is that this multiplier here is a multiplicative thing versus normal attacks. So if you're not aware how multipliers work, the way they work in Genshin Impact is you take normal, charge, plunge attack, elemental damage, all damage, and elemental skill, elemental burst, and you actually add all of those damage together and then multiply them times attack percentage, etc. The damage formula gets kind of complex, and it looks like this if you like dumb it down into like all the different formulas, and you basically have like a bunch of things that you're multiplying together. But what I mean by additive is you take all those numbers and you add them together. Now, Yoimiya is actually different than most characters because this is actually just taking all the damage that you would have done and multiplying them times 1.55. So you actually get an additional multiplier on top of the other multipliers. The reason this is so important is because it drastically changes the way that you do calculations for characters. So first off, we're gonna go into the tier list here. So the trash tier weapons for Yoimiya, based on just math and inferencing, is gonna be, we're gonna go over these weapons here. These are all the bad weapons. We're gonna take the Favonius Warboard R1 because there's low base attack. We got the Prototype Crescent. It's an okay weapon, but it has, again, mid base attack with attack percentage, so it's okay. But I'm just gonna say that this weapon's not very good on her because it's a charge attack based weapon. You have to hit a headshot to even get the proc on the passive, so it's basically just a stat stick, and you're not getting anything out of it. Favonius Warboard for battery, potentially you could see it, but not really because you can't really use her to get particles that well. The Windbloom Ode at R1 because Windbloom is trash anyways at R1. No one has it at R1, it's only on R5. And we have the Compound Bow at Physical. And then basically every single 3-star bow after that point. There is one that you could say, because arguments for it, but it's math on it says no. All right, in the tier list, and we'll talk about those. The only weapon of note for the 3-star weapon is going to be the Slingshot. The Slingshot at Refined 5 is actually a pretty decent weapon. It's going to have 60% normal attack damage on it, and it is a crit chance multiplier weapon. So if you are a very early game player, probably within the first months or so of the game, it's pretty good. In the Copium tier, these are all just weapons that you're basically like, saying it's okay. These weapons are all pretty decent. These are not amazing weapons. These are just like, hey, this is what I got right now, and I don't really have anything better. I can use it. It doesn't work great, but it's fine. We got Alley Hunter R1. We got Elegy of the End at Refine 1. Stringless Refine 1. Midderneck's Waltz R1. The Sacrificial R1 through R5. Windbloom Ode at Refine 5. Midderneck's Waltz at R5. And Prototype Crescent, Favonius Warbow R5, and Compound Bow R5. All these weapons are very Copium. Here's the Midderneck's Waltz. I honestly think that's going to be a very, very poor weapon. I tried this out. It was literally one of the worst experiences I had with the weapons. It was not great. The Alley Hunter, I have not got a chance to test it, but I did the math on it, and the math came out to it's kind of good. And the off-field time, you'd have to be up high enough, so it is possible to use Alley Hunt on this bow here, but it is kind of not the best weapon because there are much better weapons, and it doesn't really perform well in general. And you have to be on-field. Off-field to get stacks on the weapon, so you have to have a very high amount of off-field time, so it's really weird. Elegy of the End, since it's an energy recharge main stat weapon, this weapon actually falls down really heavily as far as stats go, and you have to use a lot of attack percentage, crit chance, and crit damage to even get this weapon boosted up to a point that's useful. So the Elemental Mastery 60 EM that you have mainly on the weapon doesn't also bring it up high enough, so it's also not very good there. And the proc on the weapon only works off-field, so it's not going to work super well for you, again, because of the same reason of Alley Hunt. Going up a tier to the next tier, we're going to go to the decent weapons. These weapons are all fairly good. They're not insane good weapons. They are not perfect weapons. They are all okay. And I have some math on these weapons from higher refine tier. So the Blackcliff Warbow at Refine 1 or Refine 5, you're seeing here, is probably not the best option. The issue with the Blackcliff Warbow is because Yoimiya is a single target damage dealer. And because she's a single target damage dealer, she's not able to hit multiple enemies and get multiple kills. And if you are using a character like Fischl or Beidou or potentially Shinku with him, then you're not going to get with the synergy there, you're not going to get enough damage because those characters might take the kills and make it so you don't get a proc on your Blackcliff Warbow. The Viridescent Hunt doesn't really have an optimal kind of pairing as well because this weapon is very reliant on you getting the procs in for grouping enemies, and Yoimiya, you could potentially use overloads to like trigger like fall damage and stuff and try to do weird stuff, but it's not really that great. Stringless, I did find Stringless to be a decent weapon if you are using an elemental damage support, as you're seeing here. I didn't really use elemental damage supports on this particular run, but you can see at the end of this Stringless run, we start getting some overloads and stuff, and it actually starts working out okay. It does kind of rival where the Blackcliff Warbow and Viridescent Hunt are, and it's not the best overall, but it is a possible weapon. The Elemental Burst at the end here was also kind of weak, of course, because Elemental Burst on Yoimiya is pretty trash. Alley Hunt at R5 is going to do similar damage to these weapons because it's going to be similar to like an R1 Rust, but a little bit worse than that because of how the proc works. And then Refined 5 LGN does have a high enough Elemental Mastery coefficient to be similar to these weapons as well. The last weapon I want to talk about is the Hamayumi Bow. This weapon at Refine 1 is very poor for Yoimiya because of how the proc works, as you're seeing here. This weapon, it does work okay. It's just not the best because you're not able to get the full double 2x passive until very late into the weapon's rotation. So near the very end of your damage rotation, you get the full passive stacks, but you don't get it during the middle of your rotation. So it is better than most other options. It's just not that great at Refine 1. Now this is actually the most interesting tier. This is the needed a tier below the best weapons list. This is where we're going to start getting into more math and talk about a lot of different things here. The Skyward Harp, the Refine 1 Rust, and the Hamayumi Bow. All three of these are kind of interesting weapons. So what I did here is I took the damage difference for a Hamayumi at Refine 5 and I compared it to a Refine 5 Harp. And as you can see here, with the stamina, with a similar, with the almost the exact same artifact set, I switched around ratios for the Harp. And what I did was I took some math to make Harp like a weapon that had comparable ratios. Now, Harp has a 22.1% crit rate on it, and the only way to like actually take it is to take this same value and equate it to crit damage or compare it to attack percentage. Crit damage provided more damage, so I ended up doing that. So the way to equate it, since you can get a maximum of a 3.9% crit chance roll on an artifact, and you get a maximum of a 7.8 divided by 2, of course, is 3.9%. So that's why you can say a crit damage roll is worth 2 of a crit chance roll. So I basically just doubled that value and then added that into the stat ratios in order to make this math kind of work out better, because that would be the equivalence for artifact rolls. All right, between Refine 5 Rust, Refine 1 Harp, and Refine 5 Hamayumi and Refine 5 Harp, this is the overall damage differences you can see from just the critical damage gain from the Harp. If you don't know this about the Skyward Harp, the Skyward Harp is actually only going to gain critical damage on the passive for the weapon, and you actually gain a total of 20% extra critical damage from extra weapon stacks. The only other thing you gain is going to be extra cooldown reduction on the proc hits that you get for the weapon. Now, to figure out where it would be in a tier list, you can see that a Refine 1 Harp versus a Refine 5 Hamayumi, very similar in overall damage between the two weapons when the Hamayumi does not have a proc. When the Hamayumi does have a proc, though, as we saw earlier, that weapon becomes better. On the weapon tier list, they kind of line up all three of them at this kind of level as far as where you can expect it to be for overall damage. And the Refine 5 Hamayumi is actually going to be very similar in overall damage to a Refine 1 Rust, because the Refine 1 Rust has a 40% normal attack increase modifier, whereas the Hamayumi with no proc actually has 32%. So between the two weapons, they're extremely similar, so you can extrapolate that they are all going to be on the same power scaling. Now for the best possible weapons, I actually had to go really deep into some math and try to figure out what the best weapons are. We have, of course, a pretty even power scaling between 4 different weapons. We have the Refine 5 Rust, the Refine 1 Thundering Pulse, the Refine 1 Amos, and the Refine 5 Harp. Now I did damage scaling between all of those weapons and try to figure out where there would be with buffs, without buffs, etc., with Bennett's attack buffs, etc. And I figured out that overall, these weapons do perform at similar values throughout all their damage differences. They become very, very similar between Refine 5 Rust, Refine 1 Amos, going into the Refine 1 Thundering Pulse. But the best overall weapon, no matter what, is going to be the Refine 1 Pulse. As you can see here, between the damage differences between a Refine 5 Rust and a Refine 1 Pulse, there's actually going to be more damage on a Refine 1 Pulse than there is going to be on a Refine 5 Rust. The only caveat to that, of course, is the way that the Thundering Pulse does work. The Thundering Pulse is going to give you an elemental, give you increased normal attack damage of up to 40%, not exactly 40%, and it's going to actually trigger anytime you do a normal attack dealing damage, casting an elemental skill, and when your energy is below 100%. So right after you use a Shimenawa Set and use the bow, of course, after your elemental skill, your first auto attack is going to be at the 0 stack marker, but once you do damage with your normal attack on the second hit, that is when you're going to start ramping your damage. So on your first hit, you don't see the damage from Thundering Pulse, but beyond that point, you start seeing the full stacks from the Thundering Pulse. So overall, because you can see that from every other hit beyond that, the Thundering Pulse after the first hit is going to be a much stronger weapon than the Rust, but not by leaps and bounds, just by a little bit. The other weapon that was really interesting was going to be the Refine 1 Amos. And the Refine 1 Amos, of course, because it is a very strong weapon, was actually comparable to the Refine 1 Rust. What was really interesting to see between the two weapons is that one weapon is actually better with buffs than the other. And the interesting thing with that is that the Refine 5 Rust is actually better than the Amos when more buffs are applied. And the Refine 1 Amos actually gets worse with more attack percentage buffs. Whereas the Refined 5 Amos is going to see bigger gains, and it's actually be a much stronger weapon. So of course, in the final tier of the tier list, we have the Refine 5 Thundering Pulse and the Refine 5 Amos Bow. Now, the top end for an Refine 5 Pulse has a much higher top end and overall damage than the Refine 5 Amos, but not by leaps and bounds, just by a small margin. So just know that if you are going to be using either of these weapons, they are going to be exceptional options. The Refine 5 Thundering Pulse is obviously going to be the best in slot option for your waifu, Yoimiya. So if you do have a Refine 5 Amos Bow, I believe that Refine 3 is when this weapon starts to become better than the Amos Bow. That's going to do for this video. My name is Sekapoko. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did enjoy the video, of course, like, subscribe, all the fun stuff. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.